Steve in America, this is Symbolic in San Francisco. This is a video response to your video on affirmative action, a provocative video. I'm going to have to move very quickly through this to cover all the bases, but in essence, I feel you have a misconception of the of civil rights legislation. I wanted to kind of clear that up and run some thoughts by you as well. I'm going to have to move very, very quickly. In any event, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 protects all people from discrimination on the basis of race, religion, sex, and national origin. There are a couple forms of discrimination that are addressed not so much by the legislation itself, but by the Supreme Court in their various decisions that have come down. The Congress did not define discrimination when they passed the legislation, and a number of areas have just had to be decided and formulated by the courts. Otherwise, I would recommend you read the congressional record, but it's easier just to pick up a law book or a book on social policy or public policy and read the court decisions, because the courts have to interpret the intent of Congress in order to make their decisions, and you'll find a lot of the legislative history summarized. So I recommend you read the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Some key court cases, Supreme Court decisions to make for disparate treatment. I recommend reading McDonnell Douglas versus Green. For disparate impact, Griggs versus Duke Power. For affirmative action programs and quota systems, read the Regents of the University of California versus Bakke, B-A-K-K-E. And you'll see that. You'll find that interesting, I believe. Real quick, disparate treatment is an act of discrimination against someone. Disparate impact is a discriminatory impact of a policy, law, or structure against someone or against a group. A lot of policies are facially neutral, and they don't, a discriminatory action can have a discriminatory intent, but a policy or law can quite often be non-discriminatory on the surface, but have an adverse impact upon a group. Quick example, height requirements. Police department had a height requirement. People had to be something like 6'2" to become a police officer. This resulted in a lot of Asians not being able to qualify for that job. What the Supreme Court decision said was that this is an arbitrary qualification. It's an artificial barrier that is keeping people out of the workforce. So all the artificial barriers need to be torn down. Now, it's fine to have a requirement if this is directly related to job function, ability to do the job, performance, then it's okay to have. But if it's unrelated to that, it's arbitrary, and tear it down. What you'll find is that affirmative action law basically supports merit and basically tries to tear down the artificial barriers that keep people from competing on an equal footing on the basis of merit. So there we go. There are a couple of other principles. I wouldn't call them principles of justice. Well, we have a compensatory principle of justice. We have a distributive principle of justice involved, and we also have, I think, just good public policy. If you are going to provide equal access to the goods and benefits of society, the sort of distributive justice goal, that is good for society. You're going to have a healthier, happier society. You're going to have less poverty, therefore less crime, less resentment. You're going to have a greater amount of diversity. You're going to unleash a whole ocean of talent that had previously been suppressed by discrimination. Those are good public policy goals. Now, how to achieve those, as I say, is something that we've had to struggle with, and these struggles have taken place in the court system. I have so little time to go over so much. I think that should be a good start. Just one more thing. If you place yourself back in 1964 and you look and you say, okay, we've passed these anti-discrimination laws, and that's going to help society going forward. It should inhibit, if not stop, it will at least inhibit discrimination. But what do we do? What do we do for all the people who've been to date discriminated against? How do we begin to redress that? So ask yourself how you would do it, Stephen. How would you move a bunch of people into the mainstream, of course, without violating anybody else's rights? How would you go as a policymaker, as a human resources person, um, as someone in charge administratively of policy or hiring uh, or any kind of personnel action for an organization? How do you assure that everything is going to be just and you're going to be able to move people into the mainstream who should be moved into the mainstream? Just a practical question to ask you. They're very pragmatic angles to all this. The other thing is the model. Let's take a look at a model. I won't directly address your comments about ills in the African American community. I'm not African American, obviously, so I have no right to speak for the African American community, and it would be presumptuous of me to do so. But I think it should be self-evident, Stephen, that hundreds of years of slavery and discrimination and oppression and violence against the African Americans, against any group, is going to have a devastating impact on that culture, on that subculture, devastating impact upon families, devastating impact on the culture as a whole, and on self-esteem. So now, how should this be addressed? How does society address this? How does society heal itself? I submit to you that a model not to use, a model that's improper to use, is some heroic model of self-reliance on the Western frontier. In other words, society is a system, just like the human body is a system. And if this system is exposed to a toxic substance, let's say in this case discrimination, let's relate that to say lead poisoning. If the body is exposed to this toxin for years and years and years, and eventually the liver becomes ill and starts to function poorly, do you judge your liver and say, "Oh, liver, I'm extremely disappointed in you that you have developed symptoms, and that you're ill, and I expect you to heal yourself. Heal thyself, liver, and I expect you to be self-reliant and pick yourself up and heal yourself, and I'm going to judge you if you do not immediately heal yourself." Does that make sense? Or does it make more sense to say, I, society, am ill, and I have to heal my liver? First thing I'll do is I'll stop absorbing the toxin, and then I will devote resources to healing the liver, whatever resources those happen to be, rest, medicines, what have you, sending energy to the liver, whatever it takes to heal the liver. I submit that that's a much better model for a healthy and happy society, and it's the only appropriate one to do. Just quickly, I'll also point out that discrimination is usually done against groups and members of a group. So it would be also invalid to use this individual, self-reliant, Wild West frontier myth model to address injustices to a group. That's a story. I'm glad you like to read. Remember to read to learn rather than to judge. There's my little moral preaching right there. I appreciate that you opened up the dialogue, though I must say your video was provocative to the point of being offensive, Steve. In any event, I trust that there was a lot of theater in that. Take care. Bye-bye.